Inanimate Insanity Invitational 14 is recently released, and I do not like it. It feels surreal, honestly, but this episode was so all over the place. So much of it was melodramatic and felt so unrealistic. I liked parts of it, but so many of the ideas and conflicts were just jarring. So to try and analyze my own complex feelings toward this episode, I'm going to go through each part one by one. Springy was very interesting. I like the idea behind the character, and the design and voice were pretty good. A corrupt corporate mascot trying to buy out Inanimate Insanity is a very funny idea. The problem is that they take this concept entirely seriously. Look, I'm a socialist, so I obviously agree with lots of the episode's message, but the floor's line about ethical consumption under capitalism just came off as so cringe. It's not even an inherently bad joke idea, but this episode for some reason took such a political stance. I mean, once again, I agree with it, but compared to the rest of the series, this just feels so out of place. This is to say that none of it was subtle. I know that subtlety isn't everything. I mean, I watched the movie In Time, where money is how long you have to live, which is the most obvious capitalism metaphor ever, but the movie was also built around this idea. Inanimate Insanity is a comedic and somewhat dramatic show where there is character conflict, not big stakes capitalistic conglomerate takeovers. I'm not saying that this couldn't be done well. Charlie the Unicorn did this switch perfectly, with the final part of this series being longer than all previous episodes combined, and taking a clear political stance. But it works there because of the consistent tone and comedy. The Charlie the Unicorn series was always dark, and the horribly oppressive system that most people live under is a dark subject matter that they handle well, not only in the comedy department, but in the story. The idea of capitalism being a virus that consumes all connects super well to Charlie being depressed all the time. But in Inanimate Insanity Invitational, this does not work as well. Like, why does MePhone get to decide if Bot's likeness is sold or not? Why is Bot the most popular character? I understand how popular they are, but I wouldn't say that they are objectively the most popular and marketable. You can argue that Springy simply wanted to steal the technology that made Bot to make these weird living toy things, but that should have been made way more clear. Speaking of which, I do not understand the toys that were in each cereal box or the idea of replacing the cast. Sure, corporations stifle creativity and do not want real drama and characters in what they produce a lot of the time. Presumably, Springy is saying that they would make robot replicas of the entire cast so they no longer feel sad. So basically it would be Teapot. But there is way too much going on to understand most of this, or to get enough focus to make it powerful. I kinda wish Springy was less of a serious depiction of greedy corporations, and more so just a really creepy mascot. I mean, I like the idea of each duo having to face their past, even in the convoluted way that they did it with the toys, but it didn't make any sense. Like, why the toys barely moved except for sometimes when they completely moved normally. Overall, I think Springy was an interesting idea. Stuff like the commercial near the start was just amazing, but I won't be looking back on this character and remembering any funny moments, because the episode took this way too seriously. Moving on to each duo, let's start with the least interesting one. Silver Spoon and Yin Yang's dynamic has always been interesting. Both of them have personal problems that Candle would help them with. Silver Spoon needing to be a less arrogant and rude person, and Yin Yang trying to compromise between Yin and Yang to become a more functional person. The whole wrench was thrown into this when Candle got eliminated. The idea of the two trying to think the way that she did to still function as an alliance is the obvious place to build off of, but it gets really muddled up with how Silver Spoon is acting. I never entirely bought the idea that Silver cared about Yin Yang, so I suppose his betrayal makes complete sense, but it doesn't feel genuine at all. Silver seems to be trying to use Yin Yang as a way to beat the challenge, while obviously needing them to fail so we can still get immunity. The way it is done, however, is very awkward. Silver convinces him to be more chaotic and less like Candle, candle. This can be seen as an attempt to make him a more obvious vote by the rest of the contestants, but it is never clearly for that reason. Inevitably, Silver gets Yin Yang to fall down a hole and isn't even able to get immunity. As far as I can tell, this is supposed to cement Silver as the main antagonist of the season, with Cabby clearly trying to grow as a person. I wish Blueberry rejoined. At the end of the day, the segments with Silver and Yin Yang were nothing great. The challenge they faced was basic, and the conflict of them coping with the loss of Candle and Silver's betrayal was not impactful enough to keep me entertained. It's especially annoying that Yin Yang was not eliminated after all of this. Next up, we have Balloon and Nickel, and this part of the episode is just as confusing and uninteresting as the previous. Once again, it's evident that this could have worked. It's been well set up for a while now that Balloon and Nickel would have some sort of falling out, with Nickel being upset over his luck powers as well as the things he has done in the past. But this did not feel like a good climax to any of this. Just like Silver and Yin Yang, the dialogue was very off throughout. The way they said lots of things came off as very forced, and I do not buy into this argument for a second. A lot of it feels like melodrama, with the two taking this way too seriously. It's not that it can't be taken seriously, but this episode almost seems to really want to make you cry, but it never gets close to earning that benchmark. The toy that shows up is of Suitcase, and yeah, it does not move or talk, just makes the two think about their past. I find this all very annoying. I understand it can be a good idea to bring up conflict like this, but Nickel suddenly trying to brush off all the things he did in the past felt way too forced. Especially since the two were clearly over that since becoming friends this season. You could always argue that they were just not over it because they never talked about it, but it still feels out of nowhere. I'm honestly having a hard time putting this into words. Just like the previous segment, the challenge itself was not interesting, and there was no comedy to be seen since they were having an overly dramatic fight during the whole thing. Finally, we have Cabby and Bot, probably the best part of the episode, which is not saying much. Just like the other two plot points, the drama was very overdramatic. I enjoyed parts of it. I understand the fact that Bot would fear facing Test Tube, despite knowing that she is an accepting person. It's actually a really relatable situation, but parts of it were so off. Like when the toy of Test Tube showed up, the way Bot reacted just felt so out of place. Once again, the idea of them hiding behind Cabby makes sense, but the timing and dialogue again was so awkward. I feel like Cabby worked far better as a villain as well, but she is obviously becoming a better person. I at least liked the interaction about her not writing down everything she learns about Bot, just talking to them. On the other hand, it came off as if her files weren't just something that she loved to keep, but as if it was something that she needed. It almost came off like she has some sort of memory problem, which I like the idea of, but that's not what it was. The way she said, "What if I forget?" sounds like it was ripped straight from a story about somebody with amnesia or dementia or something. If this was downplayed or removed, then I definitely would have enjoyed this one aspect of the episode way more, with Cabby treating discussions about people less as research and more like getting to know someone. This coincides with Bot's self-image issues, and yeah, they're trans and a robot, so I do not blame them. But it's all treated so much like a joke at first, without a proper tone shift. Just them suddenly freaking out about it. Overall, this episode was not good. It feels wrong to come down on an episode of Inanimate Insanity that, just like the rest, was made with such obvious love and care, but it feels like no one reviewed this script or something. Normally in shows like these, you would have the funny bits and the serious bits, but this episode is just serious for the sake of it. I hope that they can pick up the pieces and make the next episode better, but I am very scared to see what happens. Also, wow, thanks for eliminating someone when they came out as non-binary, just like with Paintbrush. I love the representation so much. Okay, obviously I'm like kind of joking. I know that they didn't eliminate Paintbrush or Bot because of them being non-binary, but it makes no sense that Yin Yang wouldn't have been eliminated, especially since it's a tiebreaker, which is the lamest thing ever. But please just be aware that this is all my own opinions, and I have no ill will towards the creators. I still recommend watching Inanimate Insanity. It's a very good show. Well, that was me, Golden Archetype, and stay gold everyone, stay gold.